Welcome to While We Were Distracted, the podcast where we explore topics that often get overshadowed in the rush of daily life. Please take a moment to like and subscribe, it really helps.
Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. Today we're tackling a topic that's sadly more relevant than ever. Human trafficking. You know it's a global crisis, with nearly 50 million people trapped in modern slavery. But we're not just here to learn about the problem, we're here to learn how to spot it, how to respond safely and effectively, and ultimately, how to become part of the solution. To guide us through this complex issue, we're joined by an expert in human trafficking.
It's great to be here, and you're absolutely right. Knowledge is power when it comes to combating human trafficking. The more we understand about the different forms it takes, the better equipped we are to recognize the signs and take action.
So let's start with the basics. What exactly is human trafficking? We hear the term a lot, but it can be hard to grasp the full scope of what it encompasses.
That's a crucial starting point. The organization Hope for Justice defines modern slavery as encompassing slavery itself, servitude, forced and compulsory labor, and human trafficking. You might be wondering, what's the difference between these forms? Well, they all involve the exploitation of another person for personal or commercial gain. This gain could be financial, sexual, or even the provision of services.
And the slavery aspect. That implies a complete lack of freedom,
Right.
someone being treated as property.
Exactly. Imagine being forced to work against your will with no control over your life or your earnings, or being coerced into a situation where you're constantly under threat of violence or punishment. That's the reality for millions of people around the world.
That's a stark picture, and it raises an important question for me. If trafficking is often hidden and covert, how can we, as everyday people, possibly spot it?
That's where awareness becomes our most powerful tool. Traffickers rely on secrecy and deception to exploit their victims. They use various tactics to lure and control individuals, often preying on those who are already vulnerable, due to factors like poverty, lack of education, or unstable home environments.
So it's not just about recognizing a specific type of person who might be a victim, but rather understanding the tactics traffickers use and the situations that make someone susceptible to exploitation.
Precisely. Traffickers are masters of manipulation. They might use violence or threats, but they can also be incredibly subtle, exploiting people's hopes and dreams, for example. They might offer false promises of well-paying jobs or educational opportunities. They might even use romantic relationships to gain control over someone.
That's chilling. To think someone could be lured into a dangerous situation under the guise of love or opportunity. It reminds me of a point raised in the Department of Homeland Security source material. They emphasize that trafficking often involves psychological coercion and control. It's not always about physical force.
Absolutely. Trauma plays a significant role. Victims might be so manipulated and controlled that they don't even realize they're being exploited. They might be afraid to speak out or seek help, especially if they've been threatened with harm to themselves or their families.
So let's get practical here. Let's say you're out in the world, at a restaurant, a shopping mall, even just walking down the street, and you see someone who seems scared, withdrawn, or like they're not in control of their own situation. What should you do?
That's the critical question. And it's important to approach these situations with both caution and compassion. First, remember that you are not a law enforcement officer. Your primary goal is to ensure the safety of yourself and the potential victim. Do not attempt to confront a suspected trafficker directly. That could put everyone in danger.
Okay, so no vigilante justice. Got it. But what can we do? Should we just ignore the situation and hope someone else will take action?
Absolutely not. Ignoring a potentially dangerous situation is never the answer. Even if you're unsure whether it's trafficking, there are steps you can take to help.
Like what? Give us some concrete advice.
The most important action you can take is to report your concerns to the appropriate authorities. The National Human Trafficking Hotline is a valuable resource, available 24/7. They have trained professionals who can assess the situation and connect you with local resources.
That's good to know. So even if we're unsure about what we're seeing, we can still report it. It's better to err on the side of caution.
Exactly. You don't need to have definitive proof. Just provide as much information as possible. The location, the time, a description of the individuals involved, and anything specific that seemed off or concerning.
That makes sense. So what kind of information should we be looking for? What are some red flags that might indicate someone is being trafficked?
The Department of Homeland Security provides a helpful list of indicators. For example, does the person seem fearful, anxious, or depressed? Do they have limited freedom of movement, or appear to be under someone else's constant control? Do they lack control over their own documents or finances? These are all potential red flags. It's also important to pay attention to their physical appearance. Do they have signs of physical abuse, malnourishment, or lack of medical care? Are they dressed inappropriately for the weather or their work environment? These could also be warning signs.
So we're looking for a cluster of these indicators, not just one isolated sign. It's about paying attention to the overall picture.
Exactly. It's about trusting your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And remember, you don't have to be a detective to make a difference. Simply reporting your concerns can be a life-saving act.
Speaking of making a difference, I know there are organizations out there dedicated to combating human trafficking. Can you tell us a bit more about their work?
Absolutely. Organizations like Hope for Justice are working tirelessly on multiple fronts. They're involved in identifying and rescuing victims, providing support and rehabilitation services, and working to prevent trafficking from happening in the first place.
Their approach seems incredibly comprehensive. What makes Hope for Justice's work particularly effective?
One thing that sets Hope for Justice apart is their multidisciplinary model. They bring together law enforcement, social workers, legal professionals, and community members to create a coordinated response. They also have a strong focus on data and research, which helps them understand trafficking trends and develop targeted interventions.
It's fascinating how they're using data to drive their efforts. It's not just about reacting to situations, but actually trying to get ahead of the problem.
Precisely. And they've had some remarkable successes, for example. Their team in Uganda played a key role in dismantling a major child trafficking ring that was operating in the Karamosha region. They were able to rescue dozens of children and bring the perpetrators to justice.
That's an incredible story of impact. It shows that these organizations are making a real difference on the ground. But how can we as individuals support their work?
There are several ways to get involved. You can donate to organizations like Hope for Justice, volunteer your time, or even just help spread awareness about human trafficking in your community. Even small actions can have a ripple effect.
I love that idea of creating a ripple effect.
Yeah.
It reminds us that we all have a role to play, no matter how big or small.
Exactly, and one area where we can all make a difference is through our consumer choices. Slave Free Alliance, a partner organization of Hope for Justice, focuses specifically on combating trafficking in corporate supply chains. They're working with businesses to ensure that their products are ethically sourced and that workers are treated fairly.
So we're talking about things like checking labels, researching companies,
Mm.
and being mindful of where our products are coming from. It's about using our purchasing power for good.
Precisely. By being conscious consumers, we can help create a demand for ethical products and put pressure on companies to address human trafficking within their supply chains. It's about voting with our wallets.
And that brings us back to this idea of collective action. It's not just about relying on organizations or governments to solve the problem. It's about each of us taking responsibility and making informed choices in our daily lives.
Absolutely. The fight against human trafficking requires a multifaceted approach. It requires awareness, education, legislation, and enforcement. But it also requires individual action. We can all be part of the solution.
So let's recap for our listeners. We've talked about the different forms of human trafficking, the tactics traffickers use, and the red flags to watch for. We've also discussed the importance of reporting suspected trafficking to the National Human Trafficking Hotline and supporting organizations like Hope for Justice and Slave Free Alliance.
Remember, even if you're unsure, it's always better to report your concerns. You could be the one person who makes a difference in someone's life.
That's a powerful reminder. We all have the potential to be everyday heroes in the fight against human trafficking. And that's what makes this deep dive so inspiring. We're not just learning about a problem. We're equipping ourselves with the tools to be part of the solution.
And that's what gives me hope. The more people who are aware of this issue, the more we can work together to create a world where everyone is truly free.
It's empowering to realize that we're not powerless, in the face of this global challenge. But I'm curious, what about those who might feel overwhelmed or unsure where to start? What would you say to someone who wants to get involved but doesn't know how?
I'd say start by educating yourself. Read articles, watch documentaries, and follow organizations like Hope for Justice and Slave Free Alliance on social media. The more you learn about human trafficking, the more equipped you'll be to recognize it and take action.
So it's about staying informed and engaged, even if it feels uncomfortable or overwhelming at times.
Exactly. We can't turn a blind eye to this issue just because it's difficult to confront. In fact, the Hope for Justice statement emphasizes the importance of transparency and accountability. They even have an internal modern slavery working group dedicated to ensuring that their own organization and supply chains are free from exploitation.
Wow, that's That's remarkable. They're not just talking the talk, they're walking the walk. It sends a powerful message that real change starts from within.
It does, and that's something we can all reflect on. Whether we're talking about our personal choices, our workplaces, or our communities, we all have a responsibility to be vigilant, to speak up against injustice, and to actively work towards a world where everyone is truly free.
This deep dive has been eye-opening, to say the least. We've explored the dark reality of human trafficking, but we've also uncovered a powerful truth. We're not helpless bystanders. We can all make a difference. We can learn the signs, report our concerns, support the organizations on the front lines, and advocate for change.
And it's that collective action, that shared sense of responsibility, that will ultimately lead to a world without slavery. It's a fight worth fighting. And every single person has a role to play.
Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today. It's been an incredibly insightful and motivating conversation.
It's been my pleasure.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us for another deep dive. Remember, we'll have all the resources mentioned today, including the National Human Trafficking Hotline number in the show notes. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you learned something new, and more importantly, that you feel inspired to speak up and make a difference.
Please take a moment to like and subscribe. It really helps.